Derek Hayes had been living alone in the Montana wilderness for almost 3 years now. His cabin sat on 100 acres of nothing but pine trees, rocky hills, and silence. At 42 years old, he preferred it that way. After spending 15 years at NASA, dealing with budget cuts, office politics, and people who cared more about funding than discovery, Derek had walked away. Now he had his telescopes, his research, and peace. That Tuesday night started like any other. Derek was in his small observatory tracking asteroid movements and updating his personal star charts. The coffee had gone cold hours ago, but he didn't notice. He never did when he was working. Then the sky exploded with color. At first, Derek thought something was wrong with his equipment. The streak of light moving across the atmosphere wasn't the usual white or orange of a meteor. This thing pulsed with colors that shouldn't exist in nature. Deep violet shifted into brilliant gold, then shimmered into silver. It looked alive, like the object was breathing as it fell. The impact came seconds later. The ground shook so hard that books fell off Derek's shelves. His coffee mug crashed to the floor. The windows rattled in their frames. This wasn't some tiny space rock burning up in the atmosphere. Something big had just hit his property. Derek was already running before his brain caught up with his legs. He grabbed a flashlight and his emergency kit, not bothering with a jacket despite the cold mountain air. His boots pounded across the dirt path leading to his north field. His heart hammered in his chest, part fear and part excitement. After 3 years of quiet isolation, something was finally happening. The crash site was easy to find. A trail of scorched grass led to a small crater maybe 10 feet wide. Smoke rose from the disturbed earth, carrying a strange metallic smell that reminded Derek of thunderstorms. He approached slowly, flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. What he found made him stop dead in his tracks. It wasn't a meteor. Not even close. The object was egg-shaped, about 3 feet tall and 2 feet wide at its widest point. The surface was smooth and crystalline, almost like glass but with a depth to it that glass didn't have. As Derek moved his flashlight across it, he saw veins of light pulsing beneath the surface. They moved in patterns like blood flowing through arteries. Like a heartbeat. His scientific mind screamed at him to be careful. This could be radioactive. Could be dangerous. Could be anything. But his curiosity was stronger. Derek reached out and placed his palm against the surface. It was warm. Not hot like something that had just fallen through the atmosphere should be. Just warm like human skin. The pulsing light intensified where his hand touched it, as if responding to him. Derek knew what he should do. Call the authorities. Call the military. Hell, call his old colleagues at NASA. This was the discovery of the century. Maybe the discovery of all time. This would change everything humanity knew about the universe. But Derek also knew what would happen if he made that call. Within hours, this place would be swarming with government agents, soldiers, and scientists. They would take this thing away, lock it up in some facility, classify everything, and Derek would never see it again. 15 years at NASA had taught him exactly how that process worked. He made his decision in seconds. Derek ran back to his cabin, fired up his old pickup truck, and carefully loaded the egg into the truck bed, surrounding it with blankets to keep it stable. He drove back to his cabin and carried the egg into his personal laboratory, a converted garage where he kept his research equipment. For 2 solid days, Derek barely slept. He ran every test his equipment could handle. Spectral analysis showed elements that didn't exist on the periodic table. Temperature readings fluctuated in impossible ways. When he tried to take a sample, his diamond-tipped drill bit shattered against the surface. The egg shouldn't exist, yet here it was, pulsing with light on his workbench. The light inside grew brighter every hour. The pulse quickened. Something was changing. On the 3rd morning, Derek was dozing in his chair when a sound woke him. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time, like crystal bells singing in perfect harmony. The egg was cracking. Fractures spread across the surface, glowing from within. Cool mist poured from the cracks, filling the laboratory with a smell Derek couldn't identify. It reminded him of ozone after lightning strikes, mixed with flowers he had never encountered. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees in seconds. Derek stumbled backward, watching as pieces of the crystalline shell fell away. They shattered on the floor into dust that glowed for a moment before fading. Inside the egg was a translucent gel that reflected light like liquid crystal. And floating in that gel was a girl. She was connected to the egg's interior by dozens of thin tendrils that pulsed with the same light that had filled the shell. Her skin was pale but had a strange shimmer to it, like pearl or opal. Her hair floated around her head in the gel, long and white as fresh snow. Along her arms and neck, delicate patterns glowed softly with bioluminescent light. Then her eyes opened. They were violet. Not just purple but a deep, rich violet that seemed to hold stars inside them. Beautiful and utterly alien. Those eyes focused on Derek, and the girl's mouth opened in a scream that shattered every piece of glass in the laboratory. The girl's body convulsed violently as the tendrils connecting her to the egg suddenly detached. She crashed onto the laboratory floor with a wet thud, gel splashing everywhere. Derek started to move toward her, but then something invisible exploded outward from her body. The blast wave hit him like a truck. Derek flew backward, slamming into his desk. All around the laboratory, glass beakers shattered. His computer monitors sparked and died. The lights flickered and went out. Even his backup generator coughed and quit. In seconds, every piece of electronic equipment in the room was dead. The girl tried to push herself up, her arms shaking. She managed to get her knees under her before collapsing again, sliding in the gel that covered the floor. Her chest heaved as she gasped for air. Her mouth opened and sounds came out, but they weren't like any language Derek had ever heard. They were musical, almost like singing, but urgent and panicked. Beautiful and terrifying at the same time. Derek slowly raised his hands, palms out, keeping them where she could see them. His heart was pounding so hard he could hear it in his ears. "Hey," he said softly, trying to keep his voice calm even though his hands were shaking. "Hey, it's okay. You're safe here. I'm not going to hurt you." The girl's head snapped toward him. Those violet eyes locked onto his face. She scrambled backward until her back hit the wall, leaving a trail of gel across the floor. Her eyes darted around the laboratory, taking in everything. The broken glass. The dead equipment. Derek. She looked absolutely terrified. Derek took a small step forward, still holding his hands up. "It's all right. You're..." The girl's hand shot up and the air between them suddenly rippled like heat waves rising from hot pavement. Derek felt pressure against his chest, solid as a wall. He couldn't move forward. Some kind of invisible barrier stood between them. He got the message. Derek stopped moving. Then very slowly he sat down on the floor. He made himself as small as possible, crossing his legs and lowering his hands to his lap. Non-threatening. Harmless. Just a guy sitting on his laboratory floor. "I'm Derek," he said quietly, pointing to himself. "Derek, you're in Montana. That's on Earth. You crashed here 3 days ago. I found you." She stared at him. Her breathing was still fast and shallow. Minutes ticked by in silence. Derek didn't move. He barely breathed. He just waited, letting her see that he wasn't a threat. Gradually, so slowly Derek almost didn't notice, the pressure against his chest eased. The barrier was fading. Derek looked around the laboratory and spotted an unopened water bottle on a shelf that hadn't been destroyed. Moving very carefully, he reached up and grabbed it. The girl flinched but didn't run. Derek slid the bottle across the floor toward her. She stared at the bottle like it might explode. Then she looked at Derek. Then back at the bottle. Very cautiously, she reached out and picked it up. She turned it over in her hands, examining it from every angle. Her fingers found the cap and twisted it off. The crack of the seal breaking made her jump slightly. She sniffed the opening, then took a small sip. Her expression changed. The terror faded just a little. She took another sip, then a longer drink. Over the next hour, Derek moved slowly and carefully. He brought her a blanket from his cabin, tossing it gently to her rather than getting too close. He found some crackers and cheese in his kitchen and placed them within her reach. He gave her space, never pushing, never rushing. Just being present and patient. The broken pieces of the egg started doing something strange. They began to glow again, brighter than before. Then images appeared in the air above them, projected like holograms but sharper and more real. Derek saw a ship, sleek and beautiful, flying through space. Then he saw it attacked by creatures that made his stomach turn. They looked like giant insects but wrong. Too many limbs. Too many eyes. Covered in black armor that seemed to absorb light. The ship tried to run but the creatures were everywhere. Then Derek saw the egg launching from the dying ship, shooting away into space like a seed blown from a dying flower. The girl pointed to the images, then touched her chest. "Lyra," she said clearly. "Lyra," Derek repeated, pointing to her. "Your name is Lyra." She nodded, and Derek saw relief in her eyes. Communication. Finally. The egg pulsed with light again, and something changed inside Derek's head. It felt like someone had flipped a switch in his brain. When Lyra spoke again, Derek could understand her. The words weren't in English, but somehow he knew what they meant. It was like the egg was teaching him her language in real time, downloading it directly into his mind. "The Vrax," Lyra said, pointing to the insect creatures in the hologram. Her voice shook. They destroyed my world. My people. They hunt us for what we are. I am the last from my ship. Maybe the last of all. You're a refugee, Derek said, the word coming to him naturally. Refugee, Lyra repeated slowly, testing the unfamiliar word. Yes, that is what I am. She explained more, her words coming in broken fragments as she searched for ways to make him understand. Her people were called the Seraphim. They were explorers and artists, not fighters. They could do something incredible, something Derek barely understood. They could turn emotions into actual energy. But they had no weapons. No soldiers. No way to fight back. When the Vrax came hunting them, wanting to harvest their biology for some terrible purpose, the Seraphim could only run. And they hadn't run fast enough. Your world, Lyra said, looking around the laboratory. The egg's intelligence. It said humans feel emotions like we do. Strong. It brought me here because of that. Derek thought about that. About all the emotions that made humans what they were. Love, hate, fear, hope, anger, joy. Maybe that was what had drawn her here. How many of your people are left? He asked quietly. Lyra's glowing patterns dimmed until they were barely visible. I don't know. Perhaps none. Perhaps I am alone now. The silence that followed felt heavy. Derek stood up slowly, making sure Lyra could see every movement. He walked toward her and extended his hand, palm up. An offering, not a demand. Then you'll stay here, he said. As long as you need to. As long as you want to. Lyra stared at his hand for a long moment. Then slowly she reached out and took it. Her skin was warm where they touched, and her patterns suddenly glowed brighter, like fireflies coming to life. Why would you do this? She asked. You don't know me. You don't know what danger I bring. Derek smiled, though it was sad around the edges. Because someone should care. Someone should help. That's what we do. 6 days after the egg landed in Derek's field, his computer started screaming with alerts. He had rigged up a basic satellite monitoring system years ago when he was still at NASA, using borrowed credentials that technically he shouldn't still have access to. He'd kept it running more out of habit than necessity. Now he was glad he had. No, 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 Derek muttered, his fingers flying across the keyboard. Data streamed across his monitors faster than he could process it. An object had entered Earth's atmosphere somewhere over the Pacific Ocean. Small, maybe the size of a car. Moving fast. Too fast for any aircraft he knew about. And it wasn't flying in a straight line. It was searching for something. Lyra appeared behind him so quietly he didn't hear her approach. When he glanced back, he saw her staring at the screen. All the color drained from her face. Her glowing patterns flickered and dimmed until they were barely visible. Vrax scout ship, she whispered. They tracked the egg's energy signature. They know I'm here. Derek's stomach dropped. How long do we have? Hours? Maybe less. Lyra's hands were shaking. She grabbed Derek's arm, her fingers digging in with desperate strength. You need to run. Get in your vehicle and drive as far as you can. They will kill everything near me. Everyone. You don't understand what they are. Derek looked at her terrified face. Then he grabbed his phone from the desk. His hands were steady even though his heart was racing. He scrolled through his contacts until he found a name he hadn't called in 3 years. The phone rang twice before a gruff voice answered. This is Tyler. Tyler, it's Derek. I need you to come to the cabin. Right now. And bring your friends from the old unit. Silence on the other end. Then, Derek? Is that really you? Man, I haven't heard from you since you left NASA. Since the funeral. What's going on? Derek closed his eyes for a moment. His brother Tyler. Former Army Ranger. The last time they'd spoken was at their mother's funeral, and it hadn't ended well. I know. I'm sorry about how I left things. But Tyler, I have someone here who needs protection. Serious protection. Military level. And I'm calling in that favor you owe me from Dad's estate. More silence. Derek could hear Tyler breathing, thinking. How bad are we talking? Alien invasion bad. A long pause. Then Tyler's voice came back, all business now. I'll be there in 4 hours. Don't do anything stupid until I get there. The line went dead. Lyra was staring at Derek like he'd lost his mind. What are you doing? Your brother can't stop them. No one can. Maybe, Derek said, standing up and starting to gather equipment. But we're going to try anyway. That's what humans do when something threatens the people we care about. We don't run. We fight. 4 hours later, Derek heard trucks coming up his long driveway. Tyler arrived with 5 other people, 2 men and 3 women, all moving with the same efficient precision. Former Special Forces, every one of them. People who Tyler trusted with his life. Derek showed them everything. Lyra. The egg fragments and their holographic projections of the Vrax. The satellite data showing the scout ship's approach. Not a single person laughed. Not one person walked away or called him crazy. Tyler stood looking at the cabin's surroundings, his tactical mind already working. All right. We fortify this position. Ben, Chris, you're on perimeter sensors. Kevin, Rachel, set up communications and early warning systems. Ashley, you're our medic, get a station ready. We've got about 4 hours to turn this place into something we can defend. Lyra watched them work with confusion written all over her face. Your people believe this so quickly? Just like that. Tyler glanced at her while checking the magazine on his rifle. Ma'am, I spent 20 years in the service. Did things and saw things I can't talk about. I learned to trust my gut, and my gut says my little brother doesn't make up stories about beautiful alien girls who need help. He slammed the magazine home and pulled the charging handle. Besides, if he says there's a threat coming, then there's a threat coming. Simple as that. The team worked fast. They placed motion sensors in a perimeter around the cabin. Set up cameras with night vision. Reinforced doors and windows. Positioned weapons at strategic points. These people had done this before, just never against alien invaders. The sun was beginning to set when the sensors went crazy with alerts. Contact. Ben shouted from his position. I've got 3 heat signatures. No, wait, 5. Moving fast through the north woods. Not human. They're too tall, moving wrong. Derek moved to the window and looked out into the growing darkness. His blood turned to ice. Coming through the trees were creatures from a nightmare. They stood maybe 7 feet tall, with angular bodies covered in black armor that seemed to drink in the light. They moved like praying mantises, all jerky and wrong. In their hands were weapons that hummed and glowed with purple energy. Light them up. Tyler roared. The forest exploded with gunfire. The sound was deafening in the quiet Montana wilderness. The Vrax shrieked, sounds that made Derek's teeth hurt. But they were fast, incredibly fast. They dodged between trees, returning fire with their energy weapons. Purple bolts tore through the air, burning holes in anything they hit. One of the Vrax warriors got close to the cabin. Chris hit it with a shotgun blast at point-blank range. The creature went down, its armor cracked and smoking. But there were too many of them. They kept coming. One smashed through the cabin's front door, ripping it off its hinges. The creature was inside before anyone could react. Derek saw its blade-like arm rise up. Saw it coming down toward Lyra. He didn't think. He just moved, throwing himself between them. The blade hit him hard, driving deep into his shoulder. The pain was like nothing Derek had ever felt, white-hot and all-consuming. He screamed, falling to his knees. Then Lyra's patterns exploded with light brighter than the sun. Energy erupted from her body in a massive wave. It hit the Vrax warrior and sent it flying backward into the wall with a sickening crunch. The creature slid to the floor, smoke rising from its body. Lyra collapsed beside Derek, her hands hovering over his wound. Blood was everywhere. No, she whispered, tears running down her face. No, please, not you. Her hands began to glow. Derek felt warmth spreading through his shoulder, pushing back the pain. But he could see Lyra shaking, her glow fading fast. She was using her own life force to heal him. What did you do? Derek gasped. Connected us, Lyra breathed. Now I feel everything you feel. And Derek could suddenly feel her too. Her terror. Her determination. Her crushing loneliness. And underneath all of that, something else. Something warm and fierce that made his heart race even through the pain. Outside, Tyler and his team finished off the last Vrax warrior. But as Derek looked at his brother's grim face, he knew they were all thinking the same thing. This was just the beginning. The real fight was still coming. Derek woke up slowly, his mind foggy and confused. The last thing he remembered was pain, terrible pain in his shoulder and Lyra's hands glowing. Now he was lying in his own bed, covered with blankets. Sunlight streamed through the window. How long had he been out? He turned his head and found Lyra sitting in a chair beside the bed, watching him. She looked exhausted, her patterns barely glowing. Through something he couldn't quite explain, Derek could feel her emotions. Worry, relief, fear. It was like having a second set of feelings running parallel to his own. I'm okay, Derek said, his voice rough. Whatever you did, it worked. Lyra's eyes filled with tears. I gave you some of my essence. My life force. Now we share thoughts and feelings. I'm sorry. It was the only way to save you. I couldn't let you die. Derek sat up slowly, expecting pain to shoot through his shoulder. Nothing. He pulled back his shirt and looked. The wound was completely healed. Not even a scar remained. Just smooth skin where the Vrak's blade had nearly killed him. "Don't apologize for saving my life," Derek said firmly. "I threw myself in front of that thing. That was my choice." Through their strange new connection, Derek felt Lyra's guilt like a weight in his chest. She stood up and walked to the window, hugging herself. "The Vrak's mothership will come soon. I've seen this pattern before on other worlds. They send scouts first to confirm the target. Then they send overwhelming force to eliminate everything. When that ship arrives, this entire region will be destroyed. Everyone for 100 miles will die." Derek's stomach clenched. "How long do we have?" 3 days. Maybe 4 if we're lucky." The bedroom door opened and Tyler walked in, followed by his team. They all looked tired. None of them had slept much. "You're awake." "Good," Tyler said. "We've been examining the Vrak's bodies. Their weapons, their armor, the technology. Derek, it's centuries beyond anything we have. Maybe thousands of years beyond us. We can't fight a mothership with rifles and determination. We need a different plan." Derek swung his legs out of bed, testing his strength. He felt fine. Better than fine, actually. "Then we don't fight it conventionally." He looked at the egg fragments still on his laboratory workbench, still pulsing with faint light. "Lyra, can that thing be turned into a weapon?" Lyra went completely still. For a long moment she didn't answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. "The birthing matrix. Yes. It contains concentrated seraphine energy. Enough to rival your nuclear weapons, maybe more. But Derek, it's my only way to call for rescue. My only way to contact any survivors of my people. My only way home." Derek felt like someone had punched him in the gut. "I know," he said quietly. "I'm so sorry." Through their bond, Lyra felt his determination and his deep regret. But she also felt something else underneath. Something that made her patterns glow just a bit brighter. He was willing to lose her, willing to strand her here forever to save his world. To save his people. That was so human, she thought. So beautifully, painfully human. They cared so much it hurt them. Lyra took a deep breath and turned to face Tyler and his team. "Teach me about human warfare," she said. "And I'll teach you about seraphine energy. We'll build something together. Something neither of our peoples could make alone." Over the next 3 days, Derek's cabin became a workshop like nothing Earth had ever seen. Lyra showed them how to channel emotional energy through the crystalline fragments of the egg. It turned out that humans were surprisingly good at it. Their emotions ran strong and deep, just like the seraphine. Ashley and Rachel worked on creating energy shields, learning to project barriers like the one Lyra had used. After dozens of failed attempts and a few small explosions, they finally got it working. The shields shimmered in the air, solid enough to stop bullets. Chris and Ben took fragments of Vrak's weapons and combined them with seraphine crystal. They created hybrid energy guns that fired bolts of concentrated power. Not as strong as the Vrak's weapons, but good enough. Kevin built something even more ambitious, a network that could take Lyra's power and amplify it using human emotions. Anger, hope, love, fear, all channeled into raw energy. It was brilliant and terrifying at the same time. Tyler made a phone call to an old general he'd served under, someone he trusted. He explained everything. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Then the general said he couldn't officially help, but he could authorize limited air support and make sure certain military assets happened to be in the area. Plausible deniability, he called it. On the third night, Derek and Lyra stood outside the cabin, looking up at the stars. The others were inside, making final preparations. Out here it was peaceful. The Montana wilderness was quiet except for crickets and the wind in the trees. "I can feel your fear," Lyra said softly, not looking at him. "But I also feel something else. Something stronger." Derek took her hand. Where their skin touched, both of their patterns glowed. His were new, faint lines of light that had appeared after she healed him. Hers were ancient and complex. Together they created something beautiful. "We're going to survive this," Derek said with conviction he didn't entirely feel. "How do you know?" Lyra asked. Derek squeezed her hand gently. "Because humans are really good at 2 things. Protecting the people we care about and making impossible things possible. We don't give up. Ever. It's probably our most annoying quality." Lyra laughed, a sad, beautiful sound. Through their bond, Derek felt her affection for him mixing with her fear. He realized he felt the same way about her. Then Lyra's hand tightened on his. "Derek, look up." He looked. The stars were disappearing. Not fading, not being covered by clouds. They were being blocked out by something massive moving across the sky. something so big it made the darkness darker. The Vrax mothership had arrived. The Vrax mothership appeared in the sky over Montana like something from a nightmare. It was massive, 3 miles of dark metal and alien architecture that blocked out the stars. The sheer size of it made Derek feel like an ant staring up at a skyscraper. Hundreds of pods began raining down from its belly, each one carrying dozens of warriors. Tyler's radio suddenly crackled to life. A voice came through, calm and professional despite what was happening. "All units, this is Falcon. You are cleared hot. Give them hell." The sound of jet engines screamed overhead. Derek looked up and saw F-22 fighters streaking across the sky, missiles launching in trails of fire. The missiles hit the descending pods and explosions lit up the dawn sky like fireworks. But for every pod that exploded, 10 more launched from the mothership. They just kept coming. "Here they come," Ben shouted from his position outside the cabin. The Vrax warriors hit the ground in waves, moving with that horrible insect-like motion. Tyler and his team opened fire immediately. Their new hybrid weapons, the ones they'd built with Lyra's help, fired bolts of energy that cut through Vrax armor like it was paper. The conventional bullets had barely scratched these things, but the Seraphine energy weapons worked. But there were so many of them. For every Vrax that fell, 3 more took its place. Inside the cabin, Derek and Lyra stood before what remained of the egg. Over the past 3 days they'd reconfigured it into something new. Crystalline spikes jutted from its surface at odd angles. The whole thing hummed with barely contained power, vibrating so hard Derek could feel it in his teeth. To activate it, they would need to channel everything they felt through their bond. Every emotion, every thought, everything that made them who they were. The egg's AI had calculated the chances. The backlash from releasing that much energy would likely kill them both. "There's still time to run," Derek said, even though he had no intention of running. "You could get in the truck and drive. Get as far away as possible." Lyra reached up and touched his face, her hand warm against his cheek. Her patterns blazed with light, brighter than he'd ever seen them. "Where you stand, I stand. That's what you said to me, remember? When you offered me sanctuary. Now I'm saying it to you." Outside, the battle was getting worse. Through the windows, Derek could see tanks rolling up the dirt roads, military helicopters circling overhead. The government had committed everything they had to this fight. But then something new emerged from the mothership. The Vrax Queen. She was enormous, easily 50 feet tall, with armor that looked like it had been forged from black diamonds. When she opened her mouth and screamed, the sound shattered every window within miles. Derek felt the cabin shake down to its foundation. Tyler's voice came through the radio, desperate and urgent. "Derek, whatever you're planning, do it now. We can't hold them much longer." Derek looked at Lyra. She nodded. Together, they placed their hands on the egg's surface. The energy hit them like lightning. Derek gasped as everything he felt surged through the bond connecting him to Lyra. His determination to protect his home. His fear of death. His anger at these creatures for bringing war to his world. His hope that humanity would survive. And underneath all of that, his growing love for the alien woman standing beside him. Lyra's emotions flowed back to him just as strongly. Her grief for her lost people. Her wonder at humanity's courage. Her gratitude for Derek's kindness. Her fierce desire to fight rather than run. And her own love, burning bright and pure. Their emotions swirled together, human and seraphine, becoming something neither species had ever created alone. The egg began to glow brighter and brighter until Derek couldn't look at it directly. Then it exploded with light. A beam of pure white energy erupted from the egg, shooting straight up into the sky. It punched through the atmosphere like it wasn't even there, moving faster than thought. The beam struck the Vrax mothership's core dead center. For one heartbeat, nothing happened. The mothership just hung there in the sky. Then it started tearing itself apart. The explosion began from the inside, spreading outward in waves of fire and destruction. Pieces of the ship, some as big as buildings, broke away and began falling. The whole thing was coming down. The shockwave hit seconds later. The blast flattened trees for miles in every direction. The cabin's roof tore away. Windows that hadn't already broken exploded into dust. On the battlefield, every Vrax warrior suddenly froze in place. The queen screamed one last time, a sound of pure rage and pain, then she simply disintegrated. Turned to ash that blew away in the wind. Every other Vrax did the same, their bodies collapsing like puppets with cut strings. In the cabin, Derek felt his legs give out. He and Lyra fell together, holding each other as their connection burned so bright it was almost white. Derek's last thought before darkness took him was that at least they'd saved everyone. Then nothing. 3 weeks later, Derek opened his eyes to fluorescent lights and the smell of disinfectant. Hospital. He was in a hospital. He turned his head slowly and found Lyra asleep in a chair beside his bed, her hand holding his. Through their bond, which was still there and still strong, he could feel her dreams. They were peaceful. Tyler appeared in the doorway, grinning like an idiot. About time you woke up, little brother. You've been out for 3 weeks. We were starting to worry. The Vrax. Derek's voice was rough from disuse. Gone. Completely destroyed. The military has been studying the wreckage. Tyler's grin faded into something more serious. Derek, there's more. Other Seraphine ships picked up the Egg's final transmission before it was destroyed. They're coming here. To Earth. Derek's heart jumped. More Vrax. No. Refugees. Other survivors looking for sanctuary. Tyler laughed. Seems like humanity made quite an impression out there in the galaxy. Words spreading about the species that stood and fought when everyone else ran. Apparently were terrifying and inspiring in equal measure. Lyra stirred, her eyes opening slowly. When she saw Derek awake, her patterns blazed brilliant gold. Through their bond, Derek felt everything she felt. Joy. Relief. Love. We won, she whispered. We did, Derek agreed, squeezing her hand. Tyler cleared his throat awkwardly. I'll give you two some privacy. Oh, and Derek? The president wants to meet you both. Something about forming an Earth Seraphine alliance. He paused at the door. Guess you're not retired anymore. When they were alone, Lyra carefully climbed into the hospital bed beside Derek. My people are coming, she said softly. But I'm staying here. With you. If you'll have me. Derek smiled and pulled her closer. Always. Outside the hospital window, the stars shined bright. And somewhere among them more ships were coming. Earth was about to change forever. But humanity was ready. They always were.